Hi, Bong Atadi. My name is Andre, and I'm one of the core team members from the non-profit initiative called Kodra Kristang. Just a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the language Kristang before this talk? 1, 2. Okay, y'all are the nerds. I love you. Okay. How many of you have a Eurasian friend? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's more than I expected. Very good. Okay, so before we jump into the talk, I'm just going to help contextualize what we're doing, okay? So this is Alex. Alex is the main character of the comic, which was just mentioned. And she is whatever age she needs to be for you to relate to her, okay? So a lot of people our age, are sort of like disconnected from our heritage. We don't really know if we belong in our own country. We can't speak our mother tongue. How many of you can actually speak your mother tongue? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pretty good. And she's still figuring out what she kind of wants to do in the future with her life. Okay? It wasn't always the case, and to understand how and why our generation has ended up in the situation that we're in now, we kind of have to look to the past. Okay? So everyone's sort of familiar with the spice trade, I hope. In the 1500s, the Portuguese came down to the region in search of spices, and Malaya being the really cool, the Malaya port, the Straits of Malacca being a really good location, was prime for this. So Alfonso the Albuquerque started trade relations with the Sultan Mahmud Shah at the time, and it didn't really go well, so it ended up with some conflict, and Mahmud Shah, with his traditional weapons of elephants, tried to attack, but the Europeans with their advanced technologies easily overcame the Malaccan forces, and the Sultan fled to Muar. Okay. The Portuguese conquered Malacca, and in return they gained a lot of money, a lot of jewelry, gold, women, and a lucrative new spice trade. Okay. When the Portuguese came and settled in the region, they strategically intermarried with the locals. So by marrying with the Malay residents, they created a new class of people called the Casados. Together with converts from the regional areas and cities, they became the first speakers of the Kristang language. Okay? So what is Kristang? Anyone here? No? Can't see anyone. Okay. Kristang is the critically endangered heritage language of the Portuguese Eurasians, like myself and like the founder, Kevin. It is a Creole, and it is spoken by not just the Eurasians of Portuguese descent, but Eurasians of Dutch and English descent. Okay. Anyone here know what a Creole is? 1, 2. Okay, good. Okay. So a Creole is a combination of two languages. When two different languages come into continuous contact, they start to blend, and over time, they sort of crystallize into a language of their own. Here are some regional Creoles which are unique to the Southeast Asian region, such as Baba Malay, which is Malay and Hokkien, Chetty, which is Tamil and Malay, Kristang, Portuguese and Malay, and our local favorite, Singlish, which is Hokkien, Cantonese, and Malay. Okay. So Kristang is pretty special. It sort of comes from two very different backgrounds. A lot of its grammar comes from Malay, while a lot of the lexicon and vocabulary come from Portuguese. Kristang also has a lot of regional influence from other regional languages such as, can I say this all the way? Hakka, Hokkien, Cantonese, Dutch, English, Konkani, Malayalam, Tamil, Hindi, and some Indian variants of Creole Portuguese. Okay, so Malay comes from the language group called the Proto-Malayo-Polynesian. Other languages which you may have heard of would be Hawaiian, Maori, Tagalog, and Javanese. How many of you guys have seen Moana? Very good. In the end, when Moana and her people sort of like sail out and they explore all of the new islands, right? That's actually how we all ended up in this region. So around like 4000 BCE, there used to be an indigenous group of people around Formosa, which is Taiwan. And they sailed down, voyaging to Southeast Asia into the Pacific Islands before settling there. And they became, the Filipinos, the Malays, the Indonesians, the Hawaiians, and so on. Yeah? The other half of Kristang, Portuguese, comes from Latin, and everyone sort of knows the Latin languages, French, Spanish, Romanian. Yep. This means that Kristang is the child of two very distinct and different language families. Okay? So, for example, the word for tame. From Proto-Malayo-Polynesian, it's dajam. In Malay, it's jinak. And in Kristang, it becomes jinadu. Okay? And heart in Latin would be cor. In Portuguese would be coração. And in Kristang would be coração. Okay? So everyone's familiar with the four national languages: English, Malay, Tamil, and Mandarin. This wasn't always the case. Singapore used to be really multicultural and really multilingual. How many languages do you think were spoken, say, about 50 years ago? Like 10, more than 10, less than 10? It's a lot, okay? Let me just tell you, it's more than 50 languages. Yeah, the entire list, based on a 2016 consensus, were the languages which were being spoken in Singapore. Okay? The linguistic diversity and linguistic landscape of Singapore was so diverse that in the mid of the 20th century, we actually had language medium schools. So just like how this school is taught in English, we would have schools taught in Malay, in Tamil, and in Mandarin. However, in the 60s, with Singapore rapidly developing, there was a huge shift towards English. English was the majority language of the world. And in order to keep up and develop, there was a huge shift in preference for parents to teach their kids English. Because of this, the enrollments in these other language medium schools started to decline, leaving the English medium schools to dominate the educational scene. Yeah. Today, a lot of young people either speak English, Mandarin, or Malay at home. They don't really speak their traditional languages, and it's actually declining amongst the youths of today. One of the reasons, because of the way our parents had raised us, we did not get in touch with our traditional languages, and therefore we do not identify with the language of our ancestors. So, like myself, I didn't learn Kristang until 2 years ago, but it was a language that had felt so natural to me. Okay? All of these languages started to disappear slowly, or it remained in the generation of our grandparents, and Kristang was no different. The situation was further exacerbated in 1989 with the ethnic integration policy, which basically requires certain neighborhoods and estates to have an even mix of people from different cultures. This essentially spread up the remaining Kristang speakers in Singapore, and as decades went on, they got old, and having resettled from kampongs, we did not have ways to keep in contact with each other. They get old, they can't travel, they can't see their friends, and eventually they just stop speaking Kristang. Today, most Eurasians of Portuguese descent don't even know what Kristang is. The Kristang that I knew growing up was 4 words, and I didn't even know it was Kristang, I thought it was Malay. Okay. The general awareness of Kristang in Singapore has also not really been that great. There hasn't been a major media publication for Kristang aside from the 2004 dictionary here, and we haven't really had like a media presence, or we're not mentioned in schools, we're not taught in schools until now. So the current situation of Kristang, how do you go about reviving a language? There isn't really a language, it can't survive without a community of speakers. So we had like a huge undertaking, right? We had to recongregate a community of Kristang speakers. And that's essentially like, we are 0.04% of the local population. How are you going to find all of these people that know the language, are willing to spend the time and meet up in a place like NUS to talk on a weekly basis? It was difficult, but we did it. This is a picture of our class population last year in November at a class party that we had. 3 different levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Okay. And honestly, I love like all of them. They are amazing people, and we had like a lot of food. There was a lot of leftovers after the party. Okay. So how did this really happen, right? In 2015, Kevin Martins Wong, the founder of Kristang, was doing some research for his accessible online linguistics magazine called Unravel about endangered languages in the region. And in doing so, he discovered Kristang, which was his own language, which he did not know about. And together with 4 other editors, Ani, Fran, Fuad, and Kevin himself, they went up to Malaysia to see some of the people who are helping preserve Kristang. So that would be Joan Marbeck, one of the last writers of Kristang, Sarah Santa Maria. She teaches both dance and the Kristang language, and Dr. Stephanie Pillay at the University of Malaya. Inspired by the tenacity of these 3 women, they started to take it upon themselves not only to learn the language, but to teach it to whoever wanted to. Kevin came up with the Pesquisa de Papia Kristang de Singapura, which is the study on documentation of Kristang in Singapore. And together with his own personal networks and the Eurasian Association, he reached out and tried to find as many of the remaining Kristang speakers that he could. So the thing about field methods in linguistics is that it's very easy to elicit information. You can ask them a question, how do you say this in your language? And you get maybe 5 different ways of saying it. But to really get to the heart of the language, you need to engage with them on their turf, which means that you need to talk to them in their language. You end up learning their language, and what's important for you to do is foster that relationship between whoever you're communicating with. Do any of you guys have grandparents that can't speak English? Yeah. How do you communicate with them if not for English? Chinese? Bahasa Indonesia? Yeah. And when you engage with them in their languages, how do they respond? Are they very excited? Are they happy? Or do they just end up nagging at you like they always do? Right? It's very important because when we show that we care enough about these older speakers to learn their language, they really start to take us in. Okay? So encouraged by both the NUS faculty and the people around him, Kevin started to learn the language from books, from the people around him. And this is Bernard. Bernard is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful man. He isn't of Eurasian descent, or of Eurasian heritage, but he's got such a strong passion for Kristang. Okay? Bernard himself came from a time when Kristang was considered a dirty language. It was considered lesser, and he was actually beaten for speaking it. So for him to have grown up being beaten for speaking his own language and still be so proud of it today is really a testament to his love for the community and the language. Bernard strongly encouraged Kevin to start the classes, and that's what happened. So Kodra Kristang came to be, and it started out in Kevin's own home with a group of his friends. So on a weekly basis, just 10 of them would meet. And eventually, Kodra Kristang became a multimodal initiative to revitalize the language. We work across platforms in different projects, in different mediums. The team itself is run by the 5 of us. So I'm the newest member of the team, together with Fran, Fuad, Kevin, and Luis. So we've got the 2 origins of Kristang, the Malay and the Portuguese. We like to brag that we have a genuine Portuguese man on our team. It's, yeah. At the heart of what we do would be our adult classes. We needed to create a community space, and classes were the best way to do it. Not only to teach it, but to sort of start the community going, to incubate it. Our adult classes are open to people of all races, religions, backgrounds, and we we want to make sure that we stay inclusive. So about 2/3 of our classes are people of Eurasian heritage and about 1/3 is not. The team is led with a core team. The initiative is led with a core team and some of the heritage speakers that you see. So it's really a collaboration between the youth and the elders of the community. And as of March 2016, we have sort of had about 500 new students come and learn beginner level Kristang. That is way more than like the original 10 that we had. Okay? Kristang has been getting a lot of attention recently. We've been featured on a lot of prominent news websites such as the Straits Times, Channel News Asia, BBC, and we've also been invited to share about our efforts in significant locations such as TEDxYouth, Kolang, and even TEDxSJII. The Kristang group, the Kadra Kristang group is very ground up, it's very grassroots. We come up with all of our slides and all of our materials ourselves. The classes utilize communicative language teaching and task-based language teaching. It's a very fancy way of saying we teach you a concept, then you go and play a game for like 20 to 30 minutes. And then we teach you another concept, you go and play the game. And that is how classes from level 1 to 4 are like. Sometimes the classes overrun because they're having a lot of fun. If you're interested, we have a Kristang version of Cards Against Humanities. Yeah. So over the last year and a half, Kristang had started picking up a lot of traction to the point that we actually ran a 2-day festival. So the first ever Kristang Language Festival was run on May 20th and May 21st of 2017, and it was held at the Asian Civilizations Museum. We hope to reach out to about 200 Singaporeans, we're honestly like a ragtag group of people just trying to revitalize the language, but instead we got 1,400 participants. Yep. And the Portuguese ambassador Luís Lorval and Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean also attended our gala dinner. Of those 1.4K participants, about 60% of them were not from Eurasian heritage. This is pretty significant because it shows that as a country and as people of Singapore, we actually do value communities and cultures that are not our own. We were very privileged to have members of our sister communities in both Macau and Malacca come down to perform and to talk and to teach us more things about themselves. We also had representatives from 15 other communities, so Minang, Boyanese, Tamil, Malayalam, and even Singapore Sign Language. They came down and we had this event called the Languages of Singapore Trail. It was by far our most popular event. There were like 350 people. And you would just go around and you talk, play a game, and you learn more about how diverse Singapore's linguistic landscape truly is. During the festival as well, we launched the first ever online Kristang Dictionary, developed by one of our core team members, Luis Morgado, and it was launched by Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean. So this is an open source word net where we had members of the community voluntarily manually enter information from the dictionary. They sat, they typed, and then they sent everything in. There's a huge Excel sheet. It is insane. And now you're thinking, where do I come in, right? I started out as a student in 2016. I didn't really expect myself to be thrown into this. I don't have academic or linguistic backgrounds that would help with this. So how do I contribute? It is important to know that there is a lot more to reviving a language than just teaching the language. A lot of us consume language in multiple ways, in stories, TV shows, jokes, memes, gossip, all of those things, right? And we really need to tap on these new medias to keep this language relevant and to make it applicable to people of our age. So one of the ways we did this was we professionally developed this game called Ila Ila de Sul, the Southern Islands. It originated as a board game within class to teach people to say, I am here, I go there, and to sort of bring to light some lesser known aspects of the local history, such as local folklore and things which existed around the region. They happen around the Southern Islands themselves here. So this is Jurong Island before it became like a massive island on its own. This here is Sentosa. Semakau is here. I think this is the landfill. And Brani. And all of these things were done within the community. I led this project. I was the art director. And a lot of the designs were done by me. This was the first of the projects that we had really professionally pushed, and it's been very well received. Another form of new media would be a short film by Victoria Scully. Victoria Scully was a recent graduate of Nanyang Polytechnic. She, her mother, and her grandmother are three generations of Kristang speakers. That is very rare for someone of our age to know the language like she does. For a final year project, she did a short film about how her great-grandmother and great-grandfather met during World War II. It has, Bobby Tinelli and Chrissy Jessiderson, and it was funded by MediaCorp, and you can actually find it on Toggle for free. It's pretty tear-jerking, honestly. And comics. How many of you guys read comics? Very good. Comics are honestly one of the best ways for us to consume and learn. Like, comics as a medium are not just superheroes, but they're stories. And for us to engage with the community, we also want to know the human aspect, not just the language. The future of our language is making it relevant again, which means we have to do more than just learn and teach. We have to build a community, which we're doing. We have to make art, we have to tell stories, we have to recite poems, make jokes, gossip, act, and do whatever we do with language on a day-to-day basis. You have to fill in the words that don't exist yet. Kristang being such an old language, we don't have a word for like computer or handphone or even Apple in some dictionaries, And what we want to do is we want to speed up the process so that people my age can start using it again. And it may seem a bit artificial, but it's very much democratic because we have a giant WhatsApp group and everyone just votes on which word they like and they suggest new words, and it becomes a community collaboration again. We have to tell stories and stories and stories. Like, how do you know about your culture if you weren't told stories as a kid, if you didn't grow up on nursery rhymes or fairy tales? And we have to welcome people from other communities. We cannot be insular. We have to be inclusionary, because if our community is so small, it will eventually die out. And there are a lot of people who are actually interested in what we do, who we are, our language, our food. We should welcome them rather than gatekeep ourselves. We have to create for the next generation. Because when we lose a language, we lose a way of seeing the world.